Well, good afternoon, Bakerview Church. At least it's afternoon right now, about 4:30 or so on Thursday afternoon, March the 19th, I believe it is. My name's Kerry, Dyck, and I'm one of the pastors here at Bakerview Church. And I'm standing in the fireside room of the Bakerview Church building. And behind the camera this afternoon is Bruce Havery. And sitting in the room is Christine Campen as well, also one of our pastors on staff here. A little bit later after this sermon time, Christine and I are going to have a conversation about it and maybe unpack some of the implications of what we talked about today. But before we get into the sermon, I wanted to just speak with you a little bit about the times in which we find ourselves. I wrote a little bit more about this in the church-wide email that went out recently, and you can read about the measures that we're taking and the suggestions we have for you there in the second half of that email. But I wanted to remind you what we said in the first half, because it bears repeating, and I'd like you to hear it in the sound of my own voice. In the middle of the crisis in which we find ourselves, the whole country, the whole world, in fact, we're all wondering what's next. Many things have changed. But I want to remind you of what has not changed. Hebrews 13:8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He has not changed. 1 John 4:16 says, God is love. God's love has not changed. His love for us has not changed, and the love that we can share with others has not changed. God is love. His love is sure. And thirdly, the church still exists. We may not be meeting within the walls of a church building, but make no mistake, we are still the church. Jesus is still building his church. We are still called to disciple, to share love with one another and with the world. So let's continue to do that in this new season in which we find ourselves. I'm excited today to bring before us Psalm 23. I find it God's great leading hand that these psalms that we have been looking at in our liturgical and traditional services over the last number of weeks were planned a long time ago. We're following the lectionary, as a matter of fact. Psalm 23 was chosen well before anyone knew the COVID-19 virus would be bearing down upon us. But it is our text for the day. And so today we get to look at Psalm 23 as our way to hear from God during this season. So let's turn to it now. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The inscription that we find in this psalm states that it's a psalm of David. So we know that he wrote it, but we don't know when he wrote it, and we don't know what prompted him to write it. We do know some things about him, however. David was the king of Israel. He became its king. He was from Bethlehem. In his youth, he tended sheep. He was a great warrior. He was a poet. He was a musician. He had an epic struggle with King Saul before he himself became king. From his family, he was the youngest of 7 brothers. He made some big mistakes in his life, and yet he kept his heart soft. He kept his heart soft before God because he was willing to repent of his sins. The first verse of the psalm makes an emphatic statement. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. This is a personal psalm. He wrote many personal psalms, and this maybe is the one we know the best. Now, certainly there is community. There is we. We is important. Community, our relationships with one another matter. Fellowship is critical, and we must love others, especially in these days, maybe in new ways, expanded ways, different kinds of ways. But the way that we love others best, if we take the word my seriously in this verse, is by having a good sense of self. Now, I'm not talking about being selfish when we talk about having a good sense of self. But what I am talking about is being self-aware. To say the Lord is my shepherd and have it mean something to me, I need a sense of myself. Who am I so that I can say the Lord is my shepherd? I need to know that I have a relationship with him and that he is mine. I need to know over whom he is shepherd, something about my life. I want to have an openness with him, dialogue with him, so I can say, yes, Lord, you are my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Now it's clear in this verse that it is the shepherd who tends the sheep. The shepherd, that's obvious, tends the sheep. The shepherd looks after the sheep, takes care of them, feeds and protects them. In this psalm, shepherd is a metaphor for God, for the Lord, Yahweh, the covenant-making, promise-keeping God. He is our shepherd. We are his sheep. I am his sheep. He takes care of me. He takes care of us. He's the one who watches over us. And this verse tells us when he's the one doing that, all of our needs are met. We lack nothing. We are safe and complete under his care. Let's look at verses 2 and 3. Do you notice all the third-person pronouns in these verses? He makes me lie down. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths. He. What does it mean? What does it mean that David addresses him in the third person? He's addressing the Lord, and in this statement is making the affirmation that it is the Lord who acts. The Lord is the mover. We are the receivers. He's the initiator. We don't have to figure out our relationship with the shepherd. Rather, he defines it for us. He leads us. We surrender to him. He leads the way. He does it. He. But don't forget all the first-person pronouns there as well. There's a lot of me and my in these verses too. He makes me. He leads me. He refreshes me. He guides me. The Lord does this for me. He is my shepherd. When that truth comes upon you, you know how powerful and stirring and refreshing it is. When your own heart, soul, and life know that you have a shepherd. That's powerful. I hope you know that. When you know that, it means the pressure is off. You don't have to figure it out because he is leading you. He does in you what you need. He provides the green pastures. He takes you to the quiet waters. He's the one who refreshes your soul. Listen, you can't refresh yourself. It's the Lord who acts, and us who receive. He does it because he's the shepherd and we're the sheep. It's not the other way around. He shepherds us. Verse 4. Something happens in this verse. Up until this point in the psalm, the psalmist is talking about God. He's talking about what the shepherd does. It's third-person stuff. And partway through this verse, there's a shift into the first person. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This is a shift. It's a shift from affirmations about God to prayer to God. Ralph Jacobson, in his commentary on the Psalms, says, it's in moments of crisis that the Lord moves from an abstract concept to a living God with whom one has a relationship. I'll say it again. It's in moments of crisis that the Lord moves from an abstract concept to a living God with whom one has a relationship. I don't know if you've noticed or not. Of course you have. We're in a crisis. We hear from our Prime Minister on a daily basis, it seems like. We hear from our health officials provincially, Dr. Henry, on a nearly daily basis. We find ourselves in a health crisis. This psalm is telling us now that we don't just talk about the shepherd, we actually have one. He is our shepherd, and we can speak to him. You are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. When he is used, we're talking about truth statements. We're stating the truth, who God is, what he does, what he's like. But when you is said, rather we're talking to the one in whom we believe, talking to the one about whom we've made statements of truth, to the one in whom we trust. We speak to him, rely on him. Now, we need the grounding of truth to be sure. We need the he statements. And we also need the you statements that come with relationship, that come with presence. You tells us that the shepherd is present, the ever-present shepherd. There is no place that God is not present. Even in our darkest valley, he's there. He dispels fear, and he comforts the suffering. Perhaps this obvious truth needs to be stated. God is not only with us when things are good. If things take a turn for the worse, does that mean that he's left us? Does it mean that he's left you? Sometimes we feel like that. But this psalm says otherwise. This psalm says that he's there when things are the darkest. It says that God is present. Certainly God is present when things are good. At least we feel his presence. Maybe sometimes we forget his presence in good times. He is the God of the green pastures, the God of the quiet waters, the God on the paths of righteousness. For sure he is. But never forget this. God is the God of the dark place too. He's at work there. He's loving there. He's present there. Sometimes he does his best work there. You may not know it. You may still cry out for mercy, but he is there. The shepherd is with you. The ever-present shepherd is with us. So we can affirm, along with our commentator, that God is not an abstract theological construct. He is the shepherd, and he's with us. He's with you, and he's with me. All the time. Even in our darkest, deepest moments. Then this psalm tells us, because of that, we need not fear. The shepherd is here. He's strong. He protects. He comforts. He gives courage. He does it. He does it for us. Well, the last two verses of the psalm tell us that the Lord, who is our shepherd, is also our host. For he sets us down at his table, his eternal table. Even in the darkest valley, even in the presence of enemies, the Lord prepares a table. And at that table, we have an overflow of blessing. Now, the word for enemies, the Hebrew word there, according to our dictionaries, refers to anything which is narrow or confining. Enemies. It may also refer to the strong emotional response that one experiences when pressed externally by enemies or internally by wrong decisions or passions. So says the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament. I find this concept of narrowness or confining around the word enemies interesting. The implication from the psalm is that while your enemies are bearing down upon you, confining you, compressing themselves around you, the Lord opens up a table. He spreads it wide. While we feel things compressing around us, the Lord is saying, I'm opening things wide for you. He makes spacious what feels confining. He gives space in a confining time. Instead of narrowing, there is overflowing. In fact, there is more than enough at the table of the Lord. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It could have said simply, your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, but it says, surely. Surely your goodness. This is a word for emphasis, a word that says, make no mistake about it. Get this. Don't miss it. Pay attention to it. You can go to the bank on this one, although banking may not be a great metaphor these days. You can count on this truth. There's a section in Revelation 7 where John, who is receiving this revelation, sees a vision of the great multitudes around the throne. In verse 17 says it this way. Oh, there's verse 6. We'll go to Revelation 7 now. It says it this way. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Doesn't that have overtones of Psalm 23 ringing in your ears? Interesting that the Lamb here is called the shepherd. The Lamb in Revelation is the one who is sitting on the throne. The Lamb in Revelation is the one who is in control. He occupies the throne. He's in control. The Lord who is our shepherd is the Lamb, and that Lamb is on the throne. Therefore, Psalm 23 is powerful because we know that the shepherd is reigning, and he's a loving, good shepherd. He leads. This Lamb who sits on the throne, who is our shepherd, leads us to springs of living water. Sounds like Psalm 23 to me. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Friends, this is our hope. We must maintain our eternal perspective in these days. Yes, we need to be present day by day, hour by hour, dealing in the reality of our situations right now. But let us do so also with one eye on eternity, one eye on the grand story, one eye on the great sweep of history, of cosmic history, which tells us that God is in control and that new creation is coming. One day it will be here. There will be no viruses, no tears, no hardship. It will be glorious new creation, a life beyond wonder that we will enter into forever in the house of the Lord with our eternal shepherd, Jesus, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, our good shepherd, my shepherd, your shepherd. Let's lean on him and trust in him. And remember these words. Go back to them again. Psalm 23. I'm sure there'll be a help, a comfort, a strength, and something you can use to care for others as well. So may God be with you in these days, and we look forward to seeing you when we see you and hearing from you in the coming while. May the peace of Christ be with you. Amen.